Are Chicago still playing at Soldier?
Yeah.
Yes.
Soldier.
And then we have
Soldier.
This right here is my
Sway.
sway. All the girls are on me. Damn.
Soldier.
It's Alex!
Well, it's episode 280, View from 202. On a beautiful late summer evening, it's all four of us here to talk Charlotte and Philadelphia. A loss and a draw. Our long, indomitable streak is over. The Red Bulls have lost at home. It may have felt to you like the Red Bulls were just unbeatable and rolling over the entire league. Well, that reverie is over. But I'm proud to say that, the impossible has happened before this very podcast. Fellas, I pulled it off. I've done the double. I visited not one, but both targets in walking distance before coming to do this podcast today.
What were you looking for?
My shampoos.
Oh.
Yeah. 2 targets, walkable distance. You'll never sing that, Charlotte.
I'm within walkable distance of like 4 different targets, and they do have different like stock and merchandising and stuff.
That's their new
and you
strat.
do need your shampoos.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
just like you need your razors and you need, all that shit.
Listen, it's no Walgreens in California that Bert Kreischer walks into.
I was gonna say, as former, as RBNY media partner Bert Kreischer has told us, you used to
spend hours.
Used to walk around in Target. Used to go to Herald Square Target and just fucking camp out.
Chloe Sevigny was just there.
The seminal text of new media, Will Sasso's Vines, New York City, baby. You gotta get this your Gatorade. Only in New York. This is the only kind of thing you can get in New York. How's your guys' last 2 weeks been since we recorded?
I don't know.
It sounds like you were praying for a job and then you got a job and heaven knows you're miserable now.
Well, I wasn't really praying for the job, I guess. I was just like, I'm just,
start
in the
job.
In the thick of things.
working to live.
Yeah, it just kind of sucks to do that. I wish we didn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, the New York Red Bulls have not distracted me from this.
I was going to say the Red Bulls might agree with you there.
So, yeah.
But
I was sick for most of last week, so you might hear a little bit of strain and crackle in my voice, but
like you were ill.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just laying my body on the line for the sake of podcasting,
You got to get that nice gravelly voice. So was this another round of COVID?
Probably. I don't know.
Made the rounds.
Maybe COVID. Maybe. I guess West Nile is going around the city again. That's the new trendy thing.
Long march towards being a swamp city.
Right. So yeah,
what's that triple E
I'm not
thing
counting anything out.
That's happened.
Triple E.
Yeah, there's like a virus, I think, that is transmitted by mosquitoes that has like a 30% death rate that's been found in New Hampshire.
Yeah, it was like Massachusetts or something,
Yeah.
I think. Hey, new thing every year. I got back from a new sporting event for me personally in New York. Yesterday I went to the tennis, the U.S. Open.
Wow.
In Queens.
I was like thinking the other day about how long I've been in the tri-state area and never been to Arthur Ashe.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's basically the world's largest Ralph Lauren outlet.
Just they're hawking a lot as merch.
All the ball people are head to toe. They have official show.
The umpires have really sick polos with long sleeves.
I went and bought a little official RL, towel.
Oh wow, look at you! I have recently been wearing a lot of RL on the golf course. That's been my preferred new performance polo. Is the Ralph Lauren Performance Polo Classic Fit.
Horsepower.
More horsepower.
POLO, players only live once.
Yeah.
I would say I prefer it to...
We're all low heads here now.
Right.
The Federer brand. I don't know about that. I've got
Do you mean Uniqlo?
Is it fully just Uniqlo?
So he wears Uniqlo, and then his sneakers, I think, are no
But
longer.
like everyone was wearing the hats that had like the RF, and it looks like Phantom of the Opera the way that it's done.
That's his logo.
Yeah. I don't know, Raj. I don't know, but it was a very different sort of sporting atmosphere that I'm used to. Compared to, let's say, the Mets games across the street or Red Bulls games. I was thinking about how much am I going to put into my 401k this year? Like things like that. Getting all the Rolex ads, but I don't know. It was fun. I'm not totally bankrupt after going just once.
Having seen Challengers, how would you compare?
I've not seen Challengers.
Okay.
So
Neither have I. I just wanted to bring that up.
yeah, no one was having sex there, I will say. And from what I hear, that apparently doesn't even really happen in the movie either. Apparently it's a very mild movie.
I recently learned that you could just play when the US Open isn't happening on the US Open courts, and you could just like pay $40.
You just rent it out like it's a city park.
There are a
Pretty
bunch
much.
of courts out there.
Yeah.
I think you can do this at Forest Hills too. I did get a kick out of like, one of the little booths, one of the pop-ups was about like the incredible transformative power of tennis. Cause like the USTA has like a 501c3 where they like,
Promote the game.
yeah, keep all their money. And it was like, tennis, the world's healthiest sport. I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I could see that. Playing tennis seems very healthy.
Yeah.
And then it's like, we at USTA believe that tennis has a like surreal ability to connect humans across sport. And I was like, all right, let's reel it in a little bit. All right.
So you'll see View from 202 doing an exhibition 2v2 tennis match for charity coming up next week.
Yeah.
I should get picked last because I fucking suck at tennis. I've like never been able.
You used to play a little, right?
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Not good enough.
No.
I think we actually didn't we go to a tennis court?
Did we?
The one at the little park that's in between us. That's with the little turf,
that's
and there's like the
right. I
one
remember
court.
that.
We went there
Yeah.
one time.
Did we play tennis?
I thought we did.
Or did we just like play
we might have
foot
just
tennis?
played foot tennis.
Yeah.
I went to high
we
school
might have done
and
that, yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up in golf and tennis paradise and just never picked up either of them.
Either of them?
It's hard to pick up, I think, if baseball was your main sport.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But
I played, I tried playing tennis growing up, but then I just became a golfer.
oh, okay. Which way, Western man? There was one Red Bull sponsored athlete at the Open I saw, and then learned that she is the daughter of a billionaire who made all of his money from basically inventing subprime credit cards.
Oh,
So
sick.
Great.
Nice.
Red Bull picking its winners.
I thought you were going to say it was like Ninja or something.
No, I don't. I still don't know who that is.
He was a model for one of the RBNY jersey drops.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, before we can talk about the comparison with match day environments, we have to talk about this away game, first Red Bulls league game in a while, at Charlotte, because all of our games are at Charlotte.
Yep.
If they're not against Philadelphia. This was a 1-1 draw against Charlotte, familiar foe. Also with a familiar name in the squad right now, Tim Ream, former Red Bull. If you can cast your mind back far enough.
Some of the older Red Bulls fans, literally.
Yeah.
Like
and, I have to confess there was like, I don't know what you would call it. I guess sort of just some sort of narrative that like, oh, Tim Ream is from St. Louis. He's obviously going to go to St. Louis when they start.
Right.
That had been such a persistent thing that in my head that had actually just happened.
Yeah.
Like I did not realize he was at Charlotte.
Bizarre. I mean, bizarre maybe it's too strong, but still just weird that he was just a regular ass player in England for a long time.
Yeah.
He ended up just being there like half his fucking life.
The quality.
He ended up only being here for like 2 years and then just being kind of like an ordinary, English league center back dwarfed that.
Exactly the type of player who just stays on the roster between championship and Premier League relegation.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of like
sides.
quadruple A player, but yeah, I mean,
that's better than most.
No, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm happy that like somebody who,
played big games in the
Well,
big
yeah,
league.
somebody is, it is like, I feel more like ownership of that than I do with like Tyler Adams at Leipzig and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's one where it's just like, I don't know, I mean, to go back, I mean, from St. Louis, just kind of like a random draft pick, ended up being a real classy player for us for a couple of years. And it's just kind of like very improbable that he ended up being that kind of player for so long. So like, pretty proud of all that. So,
I would say Tyler Adams is arguably now having a Tim Ream-esque career.
At this point, unfortunately. But
but no, I mean, I think it's important contrast that Ream's career was very stable.
Yeah.
In the way that Adams is not. And I don't think he had any major injury problems the way that Tyler Adams has. I think, that kind of player used to be the sort of backbone of the USMNT squad.
Clint Dempsey.
No, but I even mean like the slightly more ordinary type of careers. I mean,
Jeff Cameron.
Yeah, or like, Jonathan Spector had a little bit of like volatility in his career, but that was another player. I mean, Carlos Bocanegra, man of the hour, also like very like stable, like was not, in the conversation of breaking through to be like the first American superstar or anything, but like the kind of player that it was so important to have in the USMNT in that era. It's sort of providing that high floor of DeMarcus Beasley for a second there too.
Tim Howard.
And guys, like you said, Brit, guys who don't end up and aren't expected to end up becoming like superstars or anything, but are just solid pros who, like you said, have stable careers for a long time.
Yeah.
Now we have like a million guys at those levels, and they're always changing clubs every 6 minutes. And, it's just like very disorienting.
Weston McKennie could have been that kind of player if he didn't, for some unknown
insist
reason,
on being on Juventus.
Yeah, like I don't know how that happened, why it still persists on being a thing. Some sort of clerical error.
They seem to hate him.
Yeah. Like, if Weston McKennie just played for like, I don't know, Nantes or Birmingham City, like everything would make sense in the world and it would be fine. But no, he insists on being a Juventus player. And I think Ream was unlucky also to just happen to be in his prime during the Klinsmann and then missing the World Cup cycle years.
Right.
Like if that hadn't happened, he would be much more respected.
His entire prime was wasted by Klinsmann just doing his horoscopes or whatever the fuck he did to pick squads.
Jonathan Brooks.
Whatever,
Julian Green.
That's the name. Well, this was a 1-1 game. This was before Felipe Carvalho, our new signing, was in the country. So this means that our squad was anchored by Daniel Edelman and Ronald Donkor in the center, and then the surrounding cast around them is kind of a familiar, inked-in first 11, with the exception of maybe Yengor, who took the start on the right wing. But other than that, starting up top was Manuel and Van Zer. Morgan was supporting them out wide. And then, arguably our starting back five, with the exception of Kyle Duncan, who started at right back rather than Dylan Nealis. And unfortunately, this became very prominent very early on as Kyle Duncan gives up a penalty to put us behind 1-0 and is swiftly converted. Don't know what else to say for that one, but it looked like a very conventional mistake there from Kyle Duncan. No?
Yeah, and like a very old school Kyle Duncan mistake too. Just kind of a lapse of judgment, bad timing, just very clearly a foul,
Yeah.
He was due. I feel like it's been a little while since he's given up a penalty in the box.
I think in a way, maybe he's just a lot more confident on the right side, playing a right back, and then just has mental lapses, whereas maybe he's just tuned in when he's playing left back these days. Because I've honestly appreciated him as a left back this season more than when I've seen him play
I guess he was
right
getting
back.
dragged across the field to the left side of the pitch, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Because he was on the left side of the box when he gave up the foul. But, the player was going away from goal. I think as Lloyd Sam said on the broadcast, he didn't need to go in at that moment. One wonders if he just forgot what part of the field he was on even. But Pretty costly mistake, especially that early in the game when the rhythm hadn't even quite started, to just give the opposition a gimme 1-0 lead from the get-go. Pretty bad unforced error, I have to say. Other than that, though, how did you perceive this lineup doing, particularly another start where we see Doncor and Edelman pairing together?
I thought after, I think after the first goal, or this when we equalized, it was like, I think we could win, but we didn't, and I think that's shown itself like across the season to be recurring. Like, we definitely have the capabilities and the quality in creating chances, but it's just not coming together in a way that results in points. Like, I think maybe a more winning team, for lack of better term, would get through the fence, but like, I don't know what it is. It's like maybe there is just like that lack of quality to bring it over.
Well, in the way you just said, I mean, that's one of the problems with all these existential problems, or just kind of more kind of spiritual problems that we've harped on throughout this summer, is just that, like, when you do all these things like sell Amaya and then not replace him very urgently, and have Forsberg just dip out for 3 months, it's like all that kind of stuff combines to give everybody the impression, even if just subconsciously, that don't really have to go 110% at this moment, because it's not really even at like 90 or 95% as far as completion, or as progression of a project. So you don't really have to like go all the way. And that's also kind of what we were talking about on some episodes earlier in the season about, like, it's good to be in the shield hunt. It's good to have that big carrot in front of you to keep chasing, because otherwise, when you don't have that, the season just becomes kind of a slog that you're just sort of waiting out, and standards start to slip. And I think that's what you start to see in the dynamic you were just kind of describing, Peaches, where this was a game where, there was some life to it, and there were some chances here and there, but just not that full propulsion that the team maybe had in the first 2-3 months of the year.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing that we changed our schedule, because I think it pairs nicely with when we talk about Philly and the kind of the narratives that go on there.
Exactly. Well, because I mean, I guess I'll just dive into it, because I was just trying to see if it was just something somebody said online, or maybe it was something that like Danny Higginbotham said on the Philly broadcast. And I don't know if we want to just segue right into it.
Yeah, we can just merge the two.
Somebody on the night of the Philly game made a comment, and like I said, I can't find the exact source, so don't bank on it. I could be wrong maybe, but I want to say that somebody mentioned that RBNY, according to some statistical model, has a very high percentage in league wise of miscontrols. However you measure that stat, whatever model measures that, what have you. But that just, whatever stat that was cited, it sounded spot on for how I've watched this team this season. And it's probably a situation where we maybe didn't have as much of a miscontrol percentage in previous years, because we weren't trying to pass the ball that much.
Yeah.
And there just wasn't as much volume. But this year, we have a manager who is, pretty empirically trying to install a passing style of play, just have guys on the ball more, have more touches. And I think it's through a combination of, lack of quality, lack of balance in the personnel, and also the lack of chemistry and the frequent changing of the squad and injuries and stuff like that. This team, I think it was a big contrast in the Philly game, that this is a team that just still, like, even when they're trying to play good attacking football, like they have been a lot of this year, just the cohesion and everything is just not there.
Yeah.
The cohesion and just the long-term chemistry and just the general kind of like fluidity that, you need to have rehearsed for, a team to play well attacking wise just isn't really there still.
I very much noticed during the Philly game that the feeling was it was a team of individuals trying to put their quality over the game against a team of players who were playing together. And I thought that was particularly weird to see from our perspective, considering that I don't really view all of our players, except for maybe like Lewis Morgan or I guess like theoretically Emil Forsberg or someone like that, to be kind of like a superlatively quality player, you know? And it was interesting to see that a lot of the chances that were being created were from like little moments from like either a dribble or a pass, you know, that came off of Van Zer or Donkor or, you know, anyone who's playing. But it just seemed like the game was being played from our end by individuals, which it's like, well, what happened to the system as a star? And like people didn't really like, our players are very like segmented in the attack versus the midfield versus defense, where I felt like when Philly played, their transition was so much smoother and kind of overarching and in a way that like their whole team knew where everyone else was, like from center back to striker.
And also just, I mean, just couple things I know. So this was the first game that I've watched live at the stadium, Philadelphia game, you know, since I think June when I checked the schedule. Anyway, first time I've watched a game from that, you know, spatial perspective in a while. And a couple things I noticed. One, and this is kind of piggybacking on what you were just saying, Peaches, is that, and this is opinion, this isn't a long held opinion of mine, but the 4-2-2-2 sucks. Terrible formation. Just like on a basic kind of holistic level, just not a very good formation, not one that I like. It just leaves so much space without giving players intuitive paths on where they should be, and just leaves so many just weird kind of like freelance opportunities that only like the most well-rehearsed team can really make work. So there is that, and I think that's just kind of a long-term flaw to the way Schwartz, and not just Schwartz, just a lot of Red Bull managers going all the way back to Marsh have tried to get the team to play in that formation. I just think it sucks. It just doesn't work. But then beyond that, and I think this, you know, maybe is just kind of a part 1A of my complaint about the 4-2-2-2, but kind of like what you were saying, Peaches, with how Philly was so much more fluid with their counterattacks and so much more, you know, kind of clear in their ideas when they got the ball. Whenever RBNY got the ball in this game, again, watching from 202, watching from the end zone behind the goal, just running in straight lines, kind of picking up the ball. Everybody both on the ball, you know, the person on the ball is kind of hesitating a little bit, doesn't really know where to be looking. And then also, and like I said, part of, you know, playing this empty bucket 4-2-2-2 system, everybody's running these static straight lines, and it just creates no danger, except kind of like I think you were just saying, Peaches, where a guy like Morgan or a guy like Manuel, who has a burst of pace, can catch a defender napping or something like that and get that kind of run on goal or run down one of the flanks.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. But, you know, beyond that, it's just, I mean, this game especially, watching from up in 202, it was kind of clear how kind of, you know, when the team doesn't have its, you know, kind of build up from the center backs, like when Isla's getting on the ball and sort of, you know, making that opening entry pass, there's just not a lot of ideas in the transition, which is a problem for a team that's, you know, even with the passing play Schwartz is trying to install, still much more reliant on transition than the average team.
I mean, it sounds a little bit more like last year than the beginning of this season. And part of me wonders as well if this more individualized play could be a byproduct of watching someone, who had a very good season, very good spell with the club, get sort of rewarded with the promotion. And by promotion, I mean being sold to a different club. And whether, that sets the tone of, the goal for this season is to play well as an individual to earn yourself a transfer somewhere else rather than part of the cohesive unit as a team. And I mean, I guess it reminds me a little bit of what you were telling me the other weekend at the Cyclones too, about like the difference between minor league and major league things is that, sometimes at the minor league level, if you want to steal a base to try to make your case or pad your stats a little bit, regardless of whether it fits the game state or the game plan. In the minors, to some extent, that's encouraged or condoned at least. I wonder if the Red Bulls, the current squad, is looking at it and saying, well, it's not a Shield winning season. Hustling and putting together a cohesive sort of flowing state of play isn't so much the goal for this season as like growing individually. Maybe that leads to more individualized play and trying to make sparkling individual plays at the cost of fluidity.
That's an interesting point and I actually think it goes maybe even a little deeper than that, because I mean, I think it's I've never really heard it articulated like that, and I've never really thought of it that way in my head, but it kind of expresses something that I've sensed about the way Red Bull is approaching soccer, the way New York Red Bulls are approaching soccer, specifically the last, 5 or so years, however you want to time frame it, that, and even when there was somebody who I thought made sense, like Thelwell, kind of discussing some of this stuff, I didn't like the way that so much of the discourse around like promoting young players and developing young players, on top of just being, kind of like an unambitious way of running a winning team, is also just kind of a thing where it's like we're focusing more on the path of individual players rather than whether they fit into a, first team. Where I think there is a thing or a dynamic where, and certainly Red Bull would be at the forefront of this if any, club is, that, yeah, you do lean on the side of like, oh, let's just, throw a player like Julian Hall or throw a player like, what have you, the last few years onto the field in Goma, to just see what happens, instead of actually, verifying whether they're good enough to be part of a winning team, verifying whether, they can't find a different option who's actually like an established senior player from maybe another team somewhere. There seems to be a prioritizing of developing, like you were just kind of saying, Brit, focusing on individual paths rather than a team building path. There's just so many situations where they lean to the former rather than the latter in the way, Red Bull is building teams. And I think that's become so much more pronounced in the last few years. And I find it both just kind of just icky personally, on just, according to just what I find ethical about sports and whatnot, but also, I just don't think it sets you up very well to have a competitive winning team.
One that's interesting, one thing that caught my eye when reviewing the tape again before recording is towards the end of the Philadelphia game, Julian Hall had been entered into the game, and on a sort of second ball in the box, like he just makes a sort of late volley, like gets straight blocked by a Philadelphia defender. And it wasn't like a wrong decision per se, but it was something that just like clearly was never going to work. And he was just sort of hitting it because the ball was there. And I did sort of have the thought of like, that's not really like, I don't know, it wasn't a mistake, but it wasn't like a pro move.
It's not something that a professional player would do.
Or it's not something like an elite player would do, like and expect to actually work. It was very much just sort of hoping for the best, and which is fine for a 16-year-old or whatever he is. And but I think on a slightly more contextual level, it's like what good are those minutes that he's playing right now if like that's the context he's in? It feels like that was a situation where he's being thrown out there to like go make the best of it and like go like deploy some skills, but he's not learning really to, I think, appreciate like the seriousness of a game state or like work through tense moments or pressure, right. Specific game states and situations with his teammates in the way that, say, Tyler Adams was when he was getting thrown into the squad as an 18-year-old or 17-year-old in a Shield campaign where every single minute of the season did matter. I will say, though, that, I think it's worth saying that we did look a little unlucky against Philly. Did hit the post like 4 or 5 times. And so it, I think, is somewhat like if someone told me that like the score sheet is a little unfair, like the result on paper is unfair, that that I don't think that's stretching the truth to some degree. But I also think that it's worth pointing out that the 2 goals that Philly scores, I think, are the results of not having a backbone in the midfield like we should, not having like a true defensive midfield presence or a team that's has that sort of strong presence as we should. And that gets us back to the indictment of the current season of like wondering like what the theory was for how to approach the season, whether this was like a season they're going to take seriously and try to build iteratively week over week to try to mount a real season-long campaign. It seems like the answer is no. And this is the kind of result I think you leave yourself vulnerable to when you don't take the squad building seriously to try to win in this season. Results where you are vulnerable to a couple tidy finishes from the opposition, a result where you're not making your own luck.
Yeah,
and I think it's frustrating looking at this game, these 2 games. I think looking at the table and seeing how gettable this season was if they just put a little bit more focus on it. And maybe we can bring in this other article. There was a
You're referring
interview.
to the sale of Bento Estrella, right?
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
How could I forget?
How did that not come up in pre-production?
Yeah.
We were trying to go over news stories and we missed the biggest one.
There was an interview that Schwarz did with Bild, big old tabloid in Germany, where they asked him what, sort of the, how's it going? How's it going in New York?
What's the deal with New York?
Yeah.
Even though the headline was asking about Royce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, and granted, this is through Google Translate, but he's saying, I was not asked to be a master in immediately, but we're making good progress, essentially, to paraphrase. I also think that Jesse Marsch wasn't asked to be a master initially in 2015, but he did.
Right.
He did do that. And I think looking at this season, like this is a very gettable league right now, and I don't think it would have been that much more money or effort for Red Bull to like mount a serious challenge here. I think they just
not treating your squad like a bullpen of potential transfers.
Yeah, I think so.
Would go a long way. If you want to bring the entire recent conversation to a head.
Because there's some good things in these 2 matches here where like Manuel has been playing pretty well. And I think there's a couple players in the squad who remain pretty good MLS players. Harper still continues to play at a decent level. Coronel quietly still, I think, one of the better goalkeepers in the league. I think even though we probably only signed Ayla because he shares an agent with Forsberg, he's still been a very canny pickup, and we'll take our good young players where we can. It kind of, sorry to bring baseball into it again, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Mets, where like last season they said, this is not working, and they sold at the deadline, but they stopped themselves from going all the way out, and like they still had a lot to work with this roster, and they put themselves in a position where they still have a very strong chance of competing later on. I think the Red Bulls are in a similar situation here, where they're clearly not Miami or whatever and going all out on their roster, but between this core of players, Coronel, Morgan, Manuel, and I would have said Amaya at the beginning of the season, that is a very strong core of players on this roster that you could actually aspire to getting some results with, and then should be building on like a 2 to 3 year plan right now. Right now, it's not clear that they're even like what that 2 to 3 year plan ramp up is, even if you're sort of being cynical about this year. I also haven't even said the name Forsberg in this conversation. You know, I think it is funny that even if you sort of take the viewpoint that like this was not a big competing year for the Red Bulls, like then why did they add Forsberg on top of that? I don't know. It's unclear.
Well, yeah, I think you've gone ahead and said in some recent episodes that like, yeah, all of that context seems to point that it might have been more of a move of personal convenience for Red Bull Golden Boy Forsberg than it was any sort of like deliberate action on behalf of New York.
Well, I was studying Duolingo Swedish all week to ask him in person, and then he didn't show up to Scandinavian night Q&A. Yeah.
Jeez.
I've been going to IKEA every weekend. I mean, I do that anyway, but and all for naught. But
yeah. No, just kind of what's become bit of an expected tone with Forsberg now. And I guess combined with that Bild interview, Schwartz's comments on, whether Forsberg is coming back or not his finest moments, as far as, being a communicator and being a face of the club. He said a lot of good things over, since he's come on board and over the early parts of this year. At certain moments of the season, he's, kind of struck the right tone. But then, these last couple things, not very good. Both that, somebody in the press conference a couple weeks ago asked him what the situation is on Forsberg. And it sounds like, and this kind of harkens back a little bit to the, a little bit of an alarm that it seemed to be when at his introductory press conference, he and Schneider were laughing at everything and just treating it like they, weren't taking the situation that seriously. Even if the situation was just that press conference. Another situation where it seemed like Schwartz was being kind of flip about, the idea that anybody would be interested in knowing that anybody would care whether Forsberg is back or not. I can't remember exactly what he said. It was something like, it could be 7 days, it could be 10 days, it could be 20 days. And it's kind of like, no, you're kind of supposed to give us a bit more of a clear answer than that. That's kind of part of your job, your job or somebody at the club's job. And then these Bild comments, there were a couple things that I found a little bit, not to keep using the term, but, kind of flippant and glib on Schwartz's part, like kind of just saying, oh, like, I don't need to win. It's not that big of a deal yet. Even if that is, and again, this goes back to a theme that we've had on this show for what's been a while now about how everybody at the club seems to have dropped their distinction between what you say behind closed doors and what you say to the public. Because, I'm sure behind closed doors, he is just saying, and everybody is just saying, oh, yeah, this is just kind of like a rebuild year, right off year or whatever. But then, I mind you, I have been saying I wish they would come out and say it's a rebuild, but that explicitly hasn't been what the official club messaging is. So it's pretty shitty when Schwartz goes over to do an overseas interview in a different language and says exactly that, it's not, this season isn't, that big of a deal for us.
Well, don't worry, because the team's official, accounts are now taking a new, even more direct tact to why you should show up to a Red Bulls game on the weekend, which is, got nothing else to do? Why not come to the Red Bulls game?
Yeah.
That's pretty much the only reason I go to games anymore. I have nothing better to do.
Well, yeah, and then I guess the other thing that I'm just like going through that Schwartz interview again, he was asked about Forsberg, which again, like I said, the headline of the interview was asking him about Royce, but asking him about Forsberg is a subject of interest to Germans, so fine. But then, Schwartz, and again, maybe he's just like being a people pleaser, but he's just going like, oh yeah, I love Forsberg. He's been perfect. Everything about him has been great. He's the greatest guy in the world. And it's just like when he's been gone for half the season and the season's just kind of sputtering out right now, I don't don't get how you could feel that way. Even if you just say something professional, like he's, a good guy or whatever, hanging out, but he kind of went over the top and been like, it's been great. He's been perfect or whatever. And that's another thing where it just kind of speaks to me that like so much of the operation recently seems to be just kind of jobs for the Red Bull boys, more than, actually trying to go out and find the right sort of people with the right sort of kind of hunger and stuff like that for this. It seems to me that they're just kind of like, looking out and scratching each other's back with people that they like from the Red Bull offices.
Down to like Mark the Grand Prix.
Well, Julian de Guzman and just, all these just little kind of, Nepo, hires and stuff like that. It's just all kind of like, it all just speaks to the impression that that a lot of us on here can't help but get that, nobody really is taking this all that seriously. And it's all just kind of seen as a little bit of a sideshow holding room for various Red Bull assets.
I mean, there does seem to be no stakes, and there also doesn't seem to be any like parameters for success.
Right.
Like what? I don't know what defines a successful season in terms of player development, but it's much easier to do that for a team and like its position in the season. So yeah, like the assessment that Red Bull, like presuming like this corporate entity is kind of like taking to this team, like should be a little bit more thoughtful about what they're testing and like trying to prove. And like, it seems like there is no point, right? Like what's the point to all of this? Like there is this existential question of like, what are we doing this for even,
Yeah, I mean, we're
still just come out and say we're still only 1 year separated from a coach who ended his second to last season insulting the fans and then was in last place for like 3 months and was allowed to dictate his own amicable departure. Like,
right, exactly. Like, and it just seems to add to like, oh, there's no reason for anyone to change or like will for anything to change.
It is funny. The question of like, what is the point? I've thought about that myself too. And it's a funny question because like, what is the point of any sports team? Like, there isn't, we can wax poetic and I believe it about like, the value of sports is like routine and like culture and so on and so forth. But like, on a more fundamental level, there isn't really like a literal point to it. But yet with with most sports, you don't find yourself sitting there asking yourself, what is the point of this when you're there? Yeah, something about the Red Bulls right now is prompting this question.
Yeah.
And that can't be a good sign.
Like I can't just go to a game and enjoy like, oh, my team's going to win, because that's not the point of what the team is trying to do even. So
yeah, you don't get that sense at all. And I do wonder if at least these two results will bring some clarity or some things into clearer focus. Probably not. But, now looking back, it's pretty definitive that the club is not in good form. They've won 2 of their last 12, if you count Leagues Cup, 2 of their last 10, if you don't. And like the unbeaten home streak, which was already sort of
a very
silly
strained,
to like brag about. They'll thankfully no longer be able to like use that as a selling point. But maybe it will.
I'm curious how they're going to try to describe the team without referencing the fact they're like unbeaten.
Well, I guess now that I think about it, I'm worried that it will just make it so that's the last thing they ever talk about when it comes to stuff on the field.
Yeah.
I think it might really just be all about like, bring the kids out to distract them for a few hours and spend a couple $100.
Well, I think maybe just to go to one bright note on all of this, and just to maybe touch a little bit more on the Philly game as a entity in itself. We saw Carballo for the first time, and looks kind of nifty. There's still all the contextual problems of the fact that he was kind of just a slap together loan, and may or may not be an actual kind of planned long term option, but. And to the extent that he's going to be here for the next couple months, looks like he's a pretty decent player. It was a lot like Drew Yearwood's first game a few years ago, if you remember, where he was hitting these huge kind of diagonal balls that nobody knew how to react to. They were just going out of bounds, and Carballo did that like a couple times in his first 5-10 minutes on the field. So that was an interesting little parallel, and just kind of the more things change, the more things they say the same. But also just kind of along that same point, sort of an example of what you're missing the last few weeks when you don't have a sort of kind of impetus midfielder to sort of get on the ball and make things happen, make decisive passes. Hopefully he's only going to have a couple months, but hopefully he does generate a little chemistry with the team, because I think we have some decent wide players. I mean, Harper has certainly had a real breakthrough year. Yengar seems to be a little limited, but he does have at least speed to break out with. And from what I saw from Carballo, there could be some fruit there, but beyond that, kind of to repeat what I said earlier about how it's just a team, and you could see it. And we were kind of talking about this pre-show and during the game, that you can really see. It's odd that Philly's doing so poorly this year, or just kind of mid, I guess I should say. Maybe it's kind of like fixture congestion from being in continental play and all that kind of stuff, but they seem like the same old group of Philly guys for the most part, and maybe it's just kind of gotten stale, but still, compared to this Red Bulls team, they look much more well-rehearsed and just much better chemistry, and just more of an idea of what each player is going to do and needs to be doing when they're getting on the ball. And, that ended up being the difference in the game. I mean, they came out and, had a couple plays where, they literally just kind of marched down the field, and were able to get a goal. It was kind of, as we mentioned earlier, and as I kind of, called out online, it was another situation where players are just able to kind of march right through the middle of the park. We don't really have a defensive midfielder. Edelman is kind of still the default deep six, and he does well from that position if he had kind of more bite around him. But currently, if he's the main sort of deep force in the midfield, he's just doesn't really have that much of a presence. He's not really, hunting for the ball, just trying to pick up, breakthroughs and stuff like that. And but kind of on the first goal, the Ura goal specifically, again, Kyle Duncan, just kind of getting bypassed. And then Sean Nealis, who was, kind of caught upfield, was too late getting back. And of course, what I just said on Edelman, but just like, man, not kind of preaching to the choir here, and anybody who listens to this show will know that we're not huge fans to begin with, but man, just like why have so many managers been so in love with him? It's bizarre. I don't think there's any kind of like special technical soccer knowledge that you need to be able to see that. It's just like fucks up a lot of plays. Yeah. Just very unreliable on that side of the field, on both sides of the ball frequently. I don't get it.
I feel that way about John Tolkien right now.
Right now? Yeah. There seems to be kind of a consensus that Tolkien's having a shit year.
Yeah.
Maybe his head is all over the place. Certainly, I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah.
Carballo did comfortably beat the over-under. He definitely was on the under. He played before September. I asked last episode whether he would play before the 14th.
We all said no, but we got so owned.
Which, I mean, like, cool. A little bit of joking aside, I mean, that does seem to be a glimmer of something shifting where, like, it really had been, like, such standard operating procedure for, like, every transfer at this club to, like, just have an interminable couple weeks before they even show up.
Well, you know what it is? They knew that we had that year-long loan, so they're like, oh, this guy has extra time, let's get his visa in real quick.
I mean, it still wasn't that quick of a move. It still was like a couple of weeks.
That's true.
You know.
But for RBNY,
and it was helped by the fact that there was only like one game during that break.
Yeah,
that's true. But I mean, I guess we'll see if Sandro starts him coming up. But he got into the squad and played,
right?
Which by this very low standard, still feels like a quick integration into the squad.
There's not really a lot of incumbency in the midfield right now, anyway. So.
Yeah, can't imagine he wouldn't get minutes right over Donkor pretty quickly. How many days was he like actually with the team before playing? Like 2. Was it like 2-3 days?
Yeah. Honestly, I was not as impressed as Cork was about it, but I also like pretty much just blame the fact that he doesn't know anybody or has not done anything. I think that he might have that skill set to be a good player, but also like he is, a DP, right? For whatever that means. So like I do expect like an immediate impact, right?
It looked a little bad on TV. Honest, like some of the passes looked pretty.
His passing is not good.
But I also, I feel like you get a different vantage point from 202.
No, I wasn't impressed by it, like particularly what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, Frankie Amaya's already played 9 games
for Toluca.
Toluca, yeah, that feels like a lot in
the amount of time it's been.
Yeah.
He's not even our player anymore.
I know, but yeah, with Carballo, I also will, just briefly mention that. I guess they decided that the airport welcome thing wasn't quite enough for video. But again, like the airport welcome thing is something you do all or nothing. For this, it's not something you do for a player that you got for a year-long loan that you'd never heard of before. I mean, if you're like Besiktas and you can bring everyone out in the middle of the day on a Wednesday to greet any player who shows up at the Istanbul airport, great. That's not the situation we've got in America. So we don't need to try to get everyone at the airport for Felipe Carballo. But it's good that he's here and at least he's on the pitch before like 6 weeks are over. We've got 2 games coming up. We've got a game against Sporting Kansas City, and we've got a game against Chicago. Chicago, a city whose residents are not insecure about living there, and it's a great city.
They love their concrete slab beaches.
Yeah.
And Malort.
Yeah. I'm not preoccupied with what other people think about my city. Definitely not.
Yeah, another Mard Tower.
Yeah. And then, they have their own museum of ice cream. Yeah. So, what else could you possibly want?
Lindsay Jacobellis and her sister.
Yeah. But, yeah, 2 games here against to try to make a little bit of progress. It's been a while since the Rebels have won. That one Cincinnati game, but after that, it's been, all the way back to against Toronto on June 22nd. So the Rebels are deeply in need of a win here. It's going to be at home on Saturday against SKZ, and then it'll have to be away at Chicago. Both of these are gettable games. What should be, or what is a reasonable expectation, or what should we try to keep an eye out for either of these games?
Well, as you know, I do not follow foreign leagues like the Western Conference, so I won't pretend that I know everything about SKC at the moment. They were doing real bad at the start of this season to the extent that, people were somewhat sincerely calling for Vermes' head, I guess. But I guess they've kind of rebounded a little bit since then. I think they made it
still bad.
Okay. If I know anything about Peter Vermes' teams, they're, I guess it's kind of like, it just hit me kind of comparison to Oscar Pereira teams and just kind of the way Orlando plays, that maybe KC is the Western version of that, they're just kind of like, solid low block defense, just opportunistic attacking, not really trying to do anything too elaborate. But they will punish you if you are napping or, make a mistake. And, I don't know, that is, as that is all laid out, it sounds like a pretty good litmus test for where this team is right now.
Yeah, I would say that this is a game where if you are trying to make any sort of straight-faced claim that this Red Bulls team is serious or is worth watching, like this is a game you gotta win. You know, third from the bottom. SKC is third from the bottom in the Western Conference. They have 14 losses on the year. It's not even like they're just dropping points and scrappy draws. They're straight up losing a lot of games. They're, traveling a couple 1,000 miles to RBA. This is not a game that you should let this sort of opponent even really get into their heads that they can sneak a point here. You should just try to bury them and bully them out of the game from the get-go. I guess, Saloui is still on the squad and could be a, Shaqiri type player who like nicks a free kick or something, and if we're lazy, but I think that then could be a test of concentration to make sure that the team doesn't do that. But if they can't get 3 points this Saturday, I think it's really sets the tone for the rest of the season. I'm trying to avoid saying the phrase like must win, because it's not a must win game. I don't think such a game could even exist for this season at this point.
I think one thing about this sort of juncture we're at in the season is that, and just part of the purgatory of it all, is that we're now kind of at a point where any trajectory the season takes, it's going to be pretty much the same end. Yeah. We're just going to be kind of mid-table playoff team, as we have been for like 5 years now. And yeah, I just like, unless kind of, I guess, I don't know if this is necessarily what you would, expand your logic to, Brit, but, maybe they make some, huge run where, Forsberg comes back and they win like fucking almost every game for the rest of the year, and they end up in like third or something and make a big run in the playoffs. Maybe there's a chance of that happening. Outside of that, even if the team completely bottoms out, they're not going to miss playoffs. Even if the team, pulls it together and, plays a little bit better this last month or two, they might end up like fourth or third. We're now at kind of purgatory point in the season. And yeah, I think that is just a underlying foundation of all the kind of malaise and unrest in the fan base recently.
Yeah. And if we had just if we just not dropped a couple of these draws, like 3 or 4, which that sounds maybe like a lot, but I don't think that's an unreasonable ask.
When there were like 10 draws over the whole summer.
Yeah, then if we just had a couple of like 2 points here, 2 points there, we're looking at a very serious case that like we could end the season second. And in the scenario that you laid out, like Forsberg comes back and we go on a tear, like we could even get hyped up at like a scenario where we make a last ditch run at first place. But unfortunately that's just been totally foreclosed upon by all these dropped points with draws. And again, it is sort of weird in that context to see the club trying to tout all those draws as an accomplishment. Like, come on. We know how it works. I mean, maybe a lot of the audience doesn't know how that works, or like you don't expect or want them to know how that works. But, we know how the table works. Give us a break. But yeah. Chicago away is, the fact that it's away will always be a sort of asterisk. But Chicago is not doing well either. They have 13 losses on the year. They have only 26 points.
Do they still have Shaqiri?
No, didn't he leave to go somewhere?
He just dipped. I think he went back to like Switzerland.
He's the first MLS player to score in the World Cup or something, right?
That's not true.
Or
that can't be true.
A first DP, I don't know what it was. He was like during. That is not true. Yeah, you're right.
There's no right.
During the Euros this year, maybe there was something.
Oh, maybe the Euros. Yeah, maybe that could be
the first MLS player to score the Euros.
Yeah.
That seems more plausible. But I guess I'll say 4 points from these two would be
right. Yeah, combined,
acceptable.
they're both kind of like not necessarily gimmies, but also games that a good team should expect to win. So.
Yeah. 2 points here. It's like, not
More
great.
no.
Yeah, but like as Cork just laid out very well, it's like not a situation where you're like talking about Sandro's job being in danger or anything like that. But for the sake of a coherent end of the season where we can have a goal to try to peg our hopes to, I'm really hoping we get 4 points from these 2 games. That's my main interest here.
I am pretty indifferent.
Wow. Well said. Anything else for these 2 games we're looking forward to?
Anybody making the away trip to Chi-Town?
Yeah, should we drive all night?
I'm going to take the Amtrak overnight.
Takes 20 hours.
Yeah.
Hey, get one of the roomettes.
The roomettes.
Yeah. It's a blast. I recommend it.
I actually do want to get out to Chicago one of these days, but
I was watching all the
I've been meaning to do
DNC
it,
coverage of Chicago, and I was like, seems like a city.
as much as we were just ragging on it, and like everybody has. I mean, it's my personal family, motherland, but also I just haven't been there since I was a little kid. So.
I mean, the thing about all the Chicago people on Twitter being so insecure is that I do believe them. That Chicago looks very pleasant. I'm just tired of
comparing it to New York.
Yeah, like, come on. Yeah, I'll go visit. Sure.
We don't even care if it's pleasant here.
We have a bean too. We don't freak
we
out
do have a
about
bean
it.
now.
Like,
I believe you that the lake is that big. I'm sure it looks very large. I know how to look at a map.
It's great.
Yeah. I don't know what you want me to do about it. The lake is very large.
if you like the concrete beach, fucking do your thing.
You can keep it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, till then.
It's Alex!